I was washing dishes when my 6-year-old son pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand and whispered, "Mama, don't go to the cabin with Daddy. He's going to hurt you up there." I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. It was a Tuesday evening in late September, 28 years ago, in our little house on Maple Ridge Drive in Knoxville, Tennessee. I was 34 years old. I'd been married to my husband Daniel for 7 years. I thought I knew him better than I knew myself. I was so wrong it almost killed me. "Ethan, honey, what are you saying?" I crouched down and looked into his brown eyes. He was trembling. His Spider-Man pajamas were too big on him, the sleeves hanging past his wrists, and he looked so small standing there in the kitchen doorway with the fluorescent light buzzing above us. "Open it, Mama, please." I unfolded the paper. It was a drawing done in colored pencil. 2 stick figures on top of a brown shape that I realized was a cliff or a mountain ledge. One figure was pushing the other. The one being pushed had long yellow hair. That was me. I'm blonde. The one pushing had brown hair and a big smile. That was Daniel. At the bottom, my son had written in his wobbly kindergarten letters, "Daddy push Mama down." My legs gave out. I sat right there on the kitchen floor, linoleum cold through my jeans, staring at this drawing. Ethan sat beside me, cross-legged, and pulled 3 more drawings from inside his pajama shirt where he'd been hiding them. The second drawing showed Daniel on a phone, with a speech bubble that said, "Too much money," and another that said, "She has to go." The third showed Daniel putting drops into a coffee mug with a smiley face on it. My mug. The one that said "World's Best Mom" that Ethan had picked out for me at a school fundraiser. The fourth drawing was the one that made me feel like the walls were closing in. It showed Daniel standing next to a woman with dark hair and 2 small children, and above them, Ethan had written "Daddy Other House." "Where did you see these things, baby?" My voice came out like it belonged to someone else. Flat. Hollow. "Daddy's office. He doesn't close the door all the way at nighttime. I hear him talking, and I saw his other phone, the secret one in his toolbox in the garage. It has pictures of a lady and kids. He calls her every night after you go to sleep, Mama. After I go to sleep." That was the thing. I'd been falling asleep so early lately. By 8 o'clock every night, I could barely keep my eyes open. I thought it was my thyroid. I'd even gone to Dr. Patterson about it 3 times. He ran tests, couldn't find anything, told me it was probably stress from working full-time at the elementary school where I taught 3rd grade while raising a 6-year-old. "Take vitamins," he'd said. "Rest more." But I was resting. I was sleeping 10, 11 hours a night and waking up groggy, confused, like I was swimming through fog. "Mama," Ethan said, tugging my sleeve. "The drops he puts in your coffee. He does it every morning before you wake up." I watched from the stairs. My morning coffee. Daniel always made it for me, had been making it for the past 4 months, ever since he started being what I thought was more attentive, more caring. "Honey, you work so hard," he'd say, handing me the mug with that warm smile of his. "Let me do this one thing for you." And I'd thought, after years of feeling like he didn't appreciate me, that something had finally changed, that he'd realized what he had. But he hadn't been putting love in that coffee. He'd been putting something that made me slow, foggy, dependent on him for everything because I could barely function. That night I dumped my coffee down the bathroom sink before bed. I hadn't had my usual mug since morning, and already my head felt clearer than it had in months. I pretended to be drowsy, shuffled to bed at 8 like always, and closed my eyes. I listened. At 10:15, Daniel's footsteps went down the hallway to his home office. The door clicked, but didn't latch. I heard the creak of his desk chair, and then his voice, low but not low enough. "Everything's lined up for the anniversary trip. I booked the cabin on Chilhowie Mountain, the one with the overlook trail right behind it. There's a 300-foot drop, straight down into the gorge." He paused. "She's so out of it from the stuff, she can barely walk a straight line. One slip on a wet trail, a loose rock. Happens all the time in the Smokies. Hikers die out there every year. Nobody questions it." A woman's voice came through his phone speaker, soft but clear enough for me to make out. "And you're sure about the insurance?" $2 million, Daniel said. "Policy's been active for 14 months now. That's clean. No red flags. Enough time that it won't trigger any investigation. And once it's done, I'm moving up here full-time. The kids miss me." The kids miss him. Other kids. Not Ethan. Not our son. I pressed my fist against my mouth so hard I tasted blood. The woman on the phone spoke again. What about your boy? Ethan? Daniel's answer came without hesitation, without a crack in his voice, like he was reading off a grocery list. He'll stay with my mother for the weekend. I'll tell Sarah we need couple time. After the accident, Mom can keep him until I get settled. He'll adjust. Kids do. Kids do. Like our son was a minor inconvenience, a loose end to be managed. Like 7 years of reading bedtime stories and building Lego sets and teaching him to ride a bike meant nothing at all. I lay in that bed, shaking so hard the mattress vibrated, and I made myself breathe. In, out, because if I screamed, if I ran, if I confronted him right then, he'd know I knew. And a man planning to push his wife off a cliff wouldn't just stop because she found out. He'd find another way, a faster way. The next morning, I smiled at Daniel across the breakfast table, took the coffee he made me, thanked him, kissed his cheek. Then I carried the mug to the bathroom, poured it into the toilet, and flushed. Twice. From school, I called my older sister, Claire. She lived 40 minutes away in Maryville, and she'd been a criminal defense attorney for 15 years. She'd never liked Daniel, said he had dead eyes behind the charm. I always told her she was paranoid because she dealt with criminals all day. Turns out she'd been looking at one across every Thanksgiving table for 7 years. Claire didn't gasp when I told her, didn't cry. She went quiet for about 10 seconds, and then she said, "Don't change anything in your routine. I'm calling someone I trust at the Knox County Sheriff's Office. Do not let him know you know." Claire called me back within the hour. She'd reached Detective Marcus Webb, a man she'd worked cases with for a decade. Tough, quiet, meticulous. He came to my school during my lunch break, sat across from me in my empty classroom surrounded by multiplication posters and paper turkeys the kids had made for fall. He looked at Ethan's drawings and his face changed. Not dramatically. Just a tightening around his eyes, a set to his jaw. "Your son drew these?" he asked. "He's 6. He can't make this stuff up." I told him everything. The coffee, the phone calls, the other family, the cabin trip Daniel had been hinting at for weeks. Our anniversary's October 12th. He'd been calling it a second honeymoon. Detective Webb took notes in a small leather notebook. Then he said something that changed everything. "Mrs. Whitfield, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Would you be willing to go on that trip?" My blood went cold, then hot, then cold again. "You want me to go to the mountain with the man who's planning to kill me there? We'd have you wired. We'd have agents in the woods. We'd have a team positioned within 200 yards of you at all times. But we need him to act, or at minimum, to confess his intent on recording. Right now, we have a child's drawings and your testimony about overheard phone calls. A good lawyer gets that thrown out in 20 minutes. I need him on tape. I need him reaching for you at that cliff." I stared at the construction paper pilgrim hat on my desk, made by a student named Olivia, who dotted her eyes with hearts. I thought about Ethan, about what happens to a boy whose father kills his mother and gets away with it. About what happens to that same boy if his father goes to prison because his mother was brave enough to wear a wire. "I'll do it," I said. Claire nearly lost her mind when I told her. She showed up at my house while Daniel was at work, pacing my living room like a caged animal. "This is insane, Sarah. You're not trained for this." One wrong look, one flinch, and he knows. And then what? There's no trail camera that saves you if he decides to do it early, in the cabin, in the car. "That's why I need you," I told her. "I need you to take Ethan. Keep him safe. Don't tell Mom. Don't tell anyone. If something goes wrong, you take my son, and you raise him, and you make sure he knows I loved him more than anything in this world." Claire sat down on my couch and cried. It was the first time I'd seen her cry since our father's funeral in '91. Then she wiped her face, straightened her blazer, and said, "Fine, but I'm talking to Webb myself. I want to see every placement, every backup plan, every contingency. If there's a gap, this doesn't happen." There were no gaps. Over the next 4 days, Detective Webb and his team set up. They hiked the Chilhowie Mountain Trail and mapped every inch of the overlook path. They installed cameras disguised as wildlife monitors in the trees. They brought in a female agent named Lopez who'd be posing as a hiker and would stay within visual range of me at all times. They gave me a wire so thin it looked like a thread, sewn into the lining of my fleece jacket. They even brought in a geologist to evaluate the overlook ledge and determine the safest spot for me to stand, the spot where even a hard shove would land me against a rock shelf 6 feet down rather than the full drop. On Thursday night, Daniel made his move. He came home with flowers, roses, the cheap ones from the Kroger on Chapman Highway, but he'd put them in a nice vase. He set them on the kitchen table and took both my hands. I know things have been hard lately. You've been tired. I've been working too much. Let's go up to the cabin this weekend. Just us. Our anniversary's Saturday. Let's make it special. I squeezed his hands and smiled. I'd been practicing that smile in the bathroom mirror for 4 days. That sounds perfect. What about Ethan? I already talked to your mother. I lied. She'd love to have him. She's been asking. Daniel's eyes flickered. Just for a second. Something moved behind them. A quick calculation, like tumblers clicking into place in a lock. Then he smiled back. Perfect. I dropped Ethan at Claire's Friday morning. He held on to me in her driveway, his arms wrapped around my neck, his face pressed into my shoulder. Come back, Mama, he whispered. You have to come back. I will, baby, I promise you. Mama's coming back. The drive up to Chilhowie took just over an hour. October in the Smokies is beautiful. The mountains were on fire with color, red and orange and gold, and the air coming through the cracked window smelled like wood smoke and damp earth. Daniel played country music on the radio. He sang along to some song about a man loving his wife forever. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The cabin was small, 2 rooms and a porch overlooking the valley. We'd rented it once before, 3 years ago, when things were still good between us, or when I still believed they were good. Now I looked at the trail behind the cabin, the one that wound up through the trees to the overlook point, and I felt my stomach turn to water. That evening, Daniel cooked dinner, steak and potatoes on the cabin's little propane stove. He opened a bottle of red wine and poured me a generous glass. I watched him pour it with his back partially turned to me. I saw his hand move over my glass. Quick, practiced. He'd done this before. Many times. I took the glass and pretended to drink. Held it to my lips, tilted it, swallowed nothing. Over the course of the evening, I poured small amounts into the potted plant by the window when he wasn't looking. The plant was a fern. I remember thinking, I'm sorry, little fern. By 9 o'clock, I was acting drowsy, letting my eyelids droop, slurring my words slightly. Daniel watched me from across the small table. I caught a look on his face when he thought I wasn't watching. It wasn't love. It wasn't even hate. It was patience. The patience of someone waiting for an animal to stop struggling in a trap. I stumbled to bed. He tucked me in, kissed my forehead. Sleep well, sweetheart. Big day tomorrow. Our anniversary. I'll make it special. I lay there in the dark, listening to his footsteps, and I heard him step onto the porch. Through the thin cabin walls, I heard him make a call. She's out. Completely gone. Tomorrow morning I'll suggest the Overlook Trail. She loves that view. By noon it'll be done. I'll call 911. Hysterical. We were hiking. She was dizzy. She slipped. I couldn't reach her. Done. The woman on the other end said something I couldn't hear. Then Daniel said, I love you too. I'll be home by Sunday. Home. He meant his other home. In Chattanooga, I'd later learn, where he'd been living every weekend for 2 years. Where a woman named Brooke and her 2 daughters, ages 9 and 7, thought he was a long-haul trucking dispatcher who worked weekdays out of Knoxville. He'd built an entire life there, youth soccer games on Saturdays, church on Sundays, family dinners. He even had a different name in their world, David Whitfield instead of Daniel. Same last name. He wasn't even creative about it. Saturday morning, our 7th anniversary. I woke up pretending to be groggy, stumbled to the kitchen where he'd already made coffee. I drank it this time because Detective Webb had told me not to change too many things. I couldn't dump it because Daniel was watching too closely, but I drank it slow, only half the mug, and then dumped the rest when he went to the bathroom. The fogginess came anyway, lighter than before, but there, a softness at the edges of everything. I fought it. Beautiful morning for a hike, Daniel said, pulling on his boots. The Overlook Trail should be clear this time of year. Not many tourists midweek. It was Saturday, not midweek. He'd slipped, but he didn't notice. He was already somewhere else in his head, running through steps, rehearsing his performance for the 911 call. The trail was about half a mile through dense forest, steep in places. The October leaves were slick underfoot, wet from overnight rain. I walked behind Daniel and counted my breaths. The wire was taped to my skin under 3 layers. Agent Lopez was somewhere in the trees to our right. Detective Webb and 4 officers were spread along the ridge, positioned behind boulders and fallen logs. I couldn't see any of them, and somehow that was both terrifying and comforting. When we reached the overlook, I gasped. Not from fear, though there was plenty of that. The view was genuinely stunning. The valley dropped away in layers of mist and color, mountains folding into mountains for miles. A hawk circled below us, riding thermals. The overlook was a flat rock platform with no railing, no fence, nothing between you and a 300-foot straight drop into the gorge below. Daniel stood beside me, close. His hand found the small of my back. Come closer to the edge. The view's better. I'm okay here, I said. I'm a little dizzy, actually. From the altitude, he said smoothly. Just take a step forward. I've got you. He guided me forward. His hand stayed on my back. Firm now, not gentle. I could feel the intent in his fingers, the readiness. I need to tell you something, I said suddenly. I turned to face him, stepping sideways, just as Webb had coached me, away from the direct drop, toward the rock shelf. Daniel's hand tightened. What? I know about Brooke. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. The wind through the trees, the hawk somewhere below. Daniel's breathing, which stopped for exactly 2 beats and then resumed, controlled, deliberate. His mask fell off. Not slowly, not in pieces. It fell off all at once, like a switch had been flipped behind his eyes. The warm husband, the attentive partner, the loving father, gone. What replaced it was cold and flat and utterly unfamiliar. I'd slept beside this man for 7 years, and I had never once seen his real face until that moment. How, he said. Not a question, a demand. It doesn't matter how. Your sister, that nosy witch finally convinced you, didn't she? He laughed. Short, bitter, nothing funny about it. Fine. You know. So what? What are you going to do about it, Sarah? Divorce me? Take what? We have nothing. The house is mortgaged to the ceiling. I'm $60,000 in debt. You think your teacher's salary is going to save you? The debt. That was new. I hadn't known about the debt. And the insurance policy? I asked. The $2 million? Something shifted in his face. How much do you know? All of it, Daniel. The drugs in my coffee. The plan for today. The drop from this cliff that was supposed to look like an accident. All of it. He stared at me. And then he moved. He lunged forward, both hands aimed at my shoulders. I twisted the way Lopez had taught me in 2 frantic practice sessions at Claire's house. His hands caught my jacket, but not my body. I stumbled sideways, hit the rock shelf, went down hard on my hip. Pain shot through me, but I was alive, on solid rock, 6 feet below the ledge, not 300. She fell. She slipped on the wet rock. Daniel was already on his phone, his voice cracking with practiced grief. She just went over. Oh God, please send help. We're on the Chilhowie Overlook Trail. My wife? She fell. I tried to grab her. Knox County Sheriff. Freeze. Put the phone down. Step away from the edge. Hands where I can see them. They came from everywhere. From behind trees, from behind boulders, from up the trail. Webb. Lopez. 4 deputies with weapons drawn. Daniel spun around, phone clattering to the rock. His face cycled through expressions like a slot machine. Shock, rage, fear. And finally, that same cold calculation, looking for an exit, an angle, a way to talk himself out of it. There was no way out. The wire had caught every word. The cameras had caught the lunge. The drugs in my coffee mug, which Lopez had bagged from the cabin that morning, would later test positive for a sedative called zolpidem, the same thing in Ambien, ground into powder. They handcuffed him right there on the overlook, with the hawk still circling below and the mountains blazing red and gold in the October light. Detective Webb helped me climb up from the rock shelf. My hip was bruised, my hands scraped, but I was standing. I was breathing. Daniel looked at me as they led him past. "Set up," he said. "You set me up." His voice was flat, mechanical. "You tried to kill me," I said, "for money, for another woman, for a life without me in it." He didn't flinch, didn't deny it. He just said, "You were supposed to be asleep." That's when I almost broke. Not from fear, from the realization of what those words meant. That this wasn't impulse. This wasn't a moment of madness. This was a plan built over months by a man who drugged his wife every single day and made sure she was too incapacitated to notice her own murder being arranged around her. And if not for a 6-year-old boy who stayed up past his bedtime and peeked through a cracked door and understood what he was hearing better than any adult would have, it would have worked. The investigation uncovered everything. Brooke Daniels in Chattanooga, the second life. The $62,000 in gambling debt from online poker. The life insurance policy he'd taken out in my name, forging my signature on half the documents. Text messages between him and Brooke spanning 2 years, where she thought she was talking to David, a long-haul trucking dispatcher who loved her daughters like his own. She didn't know about me, didn't know about Ethan, didn't know about the insurance scheme. When the detectives showed up at her door in Chattanooga, she collapsed right there in the doorway. She was a victim, too, just wearing a different wound. The trial lasted 6 months. Daniel's attorney tried every trick. He claimed I'd orchestrated the whole thing out of jealousy, claimed the wire was entrapment, claimed the drugs were my own prescription. But Ethan's drawings, dated by his kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Lopez, no relation to the agent, showed that a child had known about the danger weeks before anyone else. My medical records from Dr. Patterson showed months of unexplained fatigue. The lab results from my coffee mug were conclusive. Brooke's testimony, tearful and devastating, proved the double life, and Daniel's own voice on the wire, calm and detailed, proved premeditation. The jury took 5 hours. Guilty. Attempted first-degree murder. Bigamy. Insurance fraud. Drugging without consent. The judge gave him 30 years. He'll be 81 when he gets out. If he gets out. Ethan and I left Tennessee after the trial, moved to Portland, Oregon, as far from the Smoky Mountains as I could get without falling into the ocean. I changed our last name to my mother's maiden name, Calloway, started over. New school for Ethan, new job for me, new life for both of us. Ethan went to art therapy for 3 years, drew his way through the trauma. His therapist said he processed what happened through his pictures long before he could process it through words. The same skill that saved my life, seeing the world in images and understanding what the images meant, became the skill that saved his mind. He's 34 now, a child psychologist at a family practice in Seattle. He specializes in children who've witnessed domestic violence, children who know things they shouldn't have to know, who see things they shouldn't have to see. He tells me sometimes that when a kid comes into his office and hands him a drawing, he remembers being 6 years old, hiding in his Spider-Man pajamas, pressing a folded piece of paper into his mother's hand. He has a daughter of his own now, Lily. She's 4. She draws constantly, fills entire notebooks with pictures of cats and rainbows and her family holding hands. Every time she hands me one of her drawings, I take it carefully, unfold it slowly, and really look. Not because I expect to find something terrible, but because I know, better than most, that what children put on paper matters. I'm 62 now. I live in a small house in Bend, Oregon, with a garden I tend every morning and a view of the Cascade Mountains from my kitchen window. Mountains that look nothing like the Smokies, and I'm glad for that. Claire visits every few months. She retired from law and writes mystery novels now, and she always says, "Sis, your real story is better than anything I could make up." I tell her I'd rather have a boring story and an alive ending. Daniel is still in prison. Still in Tennessee. I get notifications when anything changes with his case. He applied for parole once, 8 years ago. Denied. He'll be eligible again in 4 years. I try not to think about it. Claire says she'll be at that hearing with a stack of evidence and a speech that'll make the parole board cry. I believe her. Brooke rebuilt her life in Chattanooga. We exchanged letters for a while, believe it or not. Two women connected by the worst thing that ever happened to them, trying to make sense of the same man. She told me she'd loved David, the version of Daniel she knew, completely, had dreamed of marrying him. The girls called him Daddy. When the truth came out, it wasn't just her heart that broke, it was theirs too. Two little girls who lost a father who never really existed. Sometimes, when Ethan brings Lily to visit and I watch them playing in my backyard, chasing the neighbor's cat or watering my tomatoes, I think about what almost happened on that mountain. About how close he came. About the 300-foot drop and the cold October air and the way Daniel's hand felt on my back, that firm pressure, right before the push. And then I think about a 6-year-old boy sitting on the kitchen floor in his two big pajamas, pulling drawings from inside his shirt one by one, handing me the truth that every adult in my life had missed. His kindergarten teacher didn't see it. My doctor didn't see it. My friends didn't see it. I didn't see it. But Ethan did. Because children look at the world without the filters adults build. They don't rationalize away the wrong things. They don't tell themselves comfortable lies because the truth is too scary. They see what's there, and if you're lucky, if you're very, very lucky, they tell you. Do you ever wish you hadn't gone to the mountain? Ethan asked me last Thanksgiving, standing in my kitchen while I mashed potatoes and Lily drew pictures at the table with crayons. I thought about it, honestly thought about it. Then I looked at him. 34 years old, tall, kind, steady, the best thing I ever did in my whole life. And I said, no, because if I hadn't gone, he'd have found another way. Another trail, another cliff, another accident. And eventually he'd have succeeded. And you'd have grown up thinking your mother died because she was clumsy on a hike. You'd have been raised by a man who killed his wife and smiled about it. I couldn't let that be your story. He nodded, quiet. Then he said, my patients, the kids I work with, when they bring me drawings, I always think of you. I think of that night in the kitchen. Good, I said. Don't ever stop thinking about it. Because the day we stop paying attention to what children are trying to tell us is the day we fail them. He hugged me then, and I held on. 62 years old and still here, still breathing, still watching the sun set over the Cascades with my son and my granddaughter and a life that almost got stolen from me on a mountain trail in Tennessee. If you're listening to this and something feels wrong in your home, in your marriage, in the way your partner looks at you when they think you're not watching, trust that feeling. Don't explain it away. Don't tell yourself you're being paranoid or dramatic or ungrateful. And if your child comes to you with a drawing, a whisper, a fear they can barely put into words, for the love of everything you hold sacred, listen to them. Get down on their level, look them in the eyes, and believe what they're telling you. Because I almost didn't. I almost told my son he was having bad dreams, that Daddy would never hurt Mama, that everything was fine. I was one dismissive sentence away from dying on a mountain. Ethan saved my life with colored pencils and courage. A 6-year-old boy in Spider-Man pajamas who loved his mama enough to speak up when speaking up was the scariest thing he'd ever done. I owe him everything. Every sunrise in my garden. Every Thanksgiving dinner. Every drawing Lily hands me with a crayon-bright smile. Trust your children. Trust yourself. And if you're in danger right now, if the coffee tastes different, if the trips don't add up, if your child is trying to tell you something with their eyes because the words are too big and too terrifying, please hear them. You deserve to be alive. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to watch your grandchildren grow up. Get help. Get out. You are so much stronger than the person trying to destroy you thinks you are. I know, because 28 years ago, I was on my knees on a kitchen floor with a drawing in my hands and a choice to make. I chose to believe my son, and here I am,